I mean, I was totally one of the kids who liked putting on living room shows. Me and my close friend and my sister, we would do little like performances during sleepovers of like, oh, well, we have to choreograph something or we have to put on a show. And then once we had access to a camcorder or a digital camera, it was like, we got to film it. Okay, now we're making a movie. We're getting all the neighborhood kids together and we're making like a ripoff of the Chronicles of Narnia.
That's the best.
Yeah. And like the moment we realized you could like jump cut edit and make things disappear, it was like, wow, look at us. We're auteurs.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the About Story podcast. My name is Nathan Johnson, and today I'm joined by Annaliese Kassebaum. Welcome, Annaliese, to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. It's been way too long. So
I
good
know.
to see you.
It has.
Yes.
I think it's not until I even saw you that I remembered, oh my gosh, we both worked the same assistant job for a brief stint too.
That's
Oh
true.
my God,
That is
we don't
very
have to get
true.
into that, but wow, crazy times.
Yes. And, we went to school together. We were in the same graduating class as well at Biola. So that was really awesome. We had a lot of good times there.
Yeah.
It's cool to kind of see people and like how they've grown over the years and, life changes and you've actually just recently got married.
Woo,
Congratulations.
Last year. I know. It's still crazy. The new last name feels wonky in a good way. I'm excited about it, but it's just kind of funny to, oh yeah, that's me now.
Yeah. You're a new person.
Yeah. But Jared's great. When you meet him, you'll love him. He's a great guy.
Awesome. So cool. So let's talk a little bit kind of about your story and how you got started working in the industry and maybe what got you interested in filmmaking and video production in general.
I mean, I was totally one of the kids who liked putting on living room shows. Me and my close friend and my sister, we would do little like performances during sleepovers of like, oh, well, we have to choreograph something or we have to put on a show. And then once we had access to a camcorder or a digital camera, it was like, we got to film it. Okay, now we're making a movie. We're getting all the neighborhood kids together and we're making like a ripoff of the Chronicles of Narnia.
That's the best.
Yeah. And like the moment we realized you could like jump cut edit and make things disappear, it was like, wow, look at us. We're auteurs. I was thinking about this a little bit on my drive over, and I remember even being intrigued by behind the scenes featurettes. And one of the first ones I remember watching was even just like VeggieTale DVDs that we had, and it would be like the making of this episode. And I like, even though it was animated, I was just so intrigued that like, oh, there's a director and there's a writer and they like are planning this out and they're working as a team and they're like coming together to make something. I just always loved, I think, the collaboration that went into making a movie or making a story. It felt like, oh wow, this is a kind of fun that you can have that could be a job. So then growing up, I worked as a kids camp director once, like putting on a couple shows every summer with groups of friends. It was always the like, let's get together and let's make something. What's possible when we all get together? I think I latched onto that the most. Then of course went to Biola, went to film school.
Yeah, what was that experience like for you?
It was very instrumental in my growth, almost more in my like growth out of shyness and anxiety, even more than filmmaking, I think, though I did get a lot of valuable lessons and skills there. It's true what they say, your most valuable stuff is the time on set or the people you learn from, or as I trace even my freelance career, like the root of it did start with Biola people. And then you work enough jobs and you're a rock star on set and they're like, you're good. What do you want to be? Like, let me get you on my next project. And so I did that little path.
And then I think I know for me, it was like growing as a person. And so like the relationships, the people you meet, it really changes you and you help you to develop. And yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just remember feeling very shy and insecure, but also wanting to be cool like the people who felt like they had a story constantly, or they were constantly wanting to write or direct something. And I was like, oh, I want to be like that. Like, how can I be like that? But then also doubting that I had what it takes sometimes too. So it was interesting to kind of grow in that and slowly get more comfortable until by senior year,
biting off a little bit more than I could chew in a big senior project that was amazing and had amazing people involved. That was instrumental in me like really being out of my shell in a way that now I look back and I say, man, the person I am now grew so much from that and the things that came after that if I had been in that situation right now, dang, would it have been good. But at the time, there was so much like fear and like almost thinking through the lens of what people saw versus just thinking like, wow, what can we create? Though there were those moments too. But did you have similar feelings in film school, or how do you look back on it?
Definitely. I was just going to comment on that though, because it's so interesting to hear you saying that you were insecure, because actually you were one of the people that I looked up to.
Oh, shoot.
During my time at Biola, because I felt like you were always so ambitious. You were always doing cool things. I think you were one of the first people to actually, it was a feature. And you were, I don't know if there was not, I don't think there's anybody else in our class that was going to do a feature. And very few students at the school for its whole history had just tried to do a feature.
Right.
So it was super ambitious. And you guys were like working, getting funding and doing the marketing campaigns for it and actually shooting it. I think it was like a month of shooting or a couple months. And then pickups and the whole thing. Like, so like that for me, that was so encouraging for me to see that. It's like someone my age was going out and doing something so cool and so amazing. So yeah, kudos to you for that. Yeah.
Well, thanks for saying that. I do know that we had an amazing team, and it was me and a couple other producers who kind of all put our hands in and said, let's be crazy, or like basically it was a good time to take a risk because you have so many opportunities as a student or a freshly not a student that it was the time to make big steps. And I think that's still true in a lot of ways. But yeah, I look back and realize that the thing that I was so drawn to even before college and for that project was, wow, I love what happens when people get together and they're like, let's all collaborate, or let's all have a little piece of this together, and the fun you can make from that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a comedy too, so I think that helps in the like, okay, how can we make this silly? How can we make this fun? How can you feel appreciated in what you're contributing? Because I know that indie filmmaking is
it can be tough,
man, the wild west. So I think that's what I look back with the most fondness of, like, wow, the glimpses of those moments and that energy was awesome. Amazing.
And I think finding those people, like, that's so important when you're working on any project that you're doing, whether you're writing, you're producing, directing, like whatever it is. When you can find the people that you surround yourself with, that's so important.
Oh yeah.
And it makes the world of difference.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
I mean, we had so many meetings, but there would just be fun ways that we would come together or take notes or laugh at the face of adversity, or
yeah, it's such a good life skill, I think, to have, because no matter what you're doing, you're still going to need that.
Yeah.
Even if it's not film related at all.
Definitely.
After that, you kind of went into like after you graduated school, you started getting into a little more freelance work, right? What was that process like for you? At that point, were you focusing more on, like, I know a lot of times we get out of school and we're just like, we just got to get a job anywhere we can find. What was your first job?
For me, it was taking now this project with me and knowing, okay, I don't want to jump full time into anything because I want to be in post and overseeing the rest of this project. So I had other people on the project giving me that advice of like, oh, don't jump full time into anything. Let's just spend some time finishing this and then it'll launch us to even more. And so I did want that, but I also was hesitant because you get out of college and you feel this pressure of like, okay, I did it. Now I have to be amazing or be the change I want to see in the world, and I have to be successful at it right away. And even though you tell yourself that's not true, you still feel it deep down.
Yeah.
So I actually moved back in with my parents for a little bit, started taking freelance gigs just as a production assistant or wherever I could. You start on small rinky-dink projects where you realize later, wow, that was a time, and you slowly inch your ways until the better and better sets where you're like, wow, I get this much free food every day, like, and you're just amazed at the abundance of some of those sets. But I even spent some time working part-time in kids ministry at my church because I had a pastor there see my passion for working with kids, which I have had throughout my life, and also my creativity. And she's like, I'd love to just design a role for you where you're helping us oversee the production of different storytelling videos or events or volunteer. They gave me the flexibility to have a little bit of pay, but I could always take time off to work on projects or to work freelance gigs. But over time, And it was awesome and it was creatively fulfilling. But over time, I realized I needed to take a bigger leap because it was also a comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it was keeping me from full on diving in to say, hey, no, if you want to be doing this thing that scares you, but you know that you want, like, sometimes you got to take away the safety net. And I recognized for me that I needed to. So yeah, I did that. And it's funny how you do that and the jobs come or the gigs pop up and it's a little harried at times, but you make it work. AD'd a feature, worked as an assistant for a short while in a role supporting 2 people where with one person I really like, oh, I love assisting them. And with the other person, I was like, I can't read you at all. And so it caused a lot of stress. So I realized that was the space of, okay, how can I learn from this and grow from this, but also not keep a safety net of I need a full-time thing in order to be successful. And that eventually led to taking a few more risks. So I feel like this is boring.
No,
I'm so sorry. I'm just like, and then I did this and then I did that.
No, I mean, I think it's so interesting to kind of see your journey because everyone has like their own journey that they take. And, you know, sometimes it's like in a straight line and sometimes it's pretty zigzaggy.
Yeah.
But each one has its own ups and downs, its own the things that you learn along the way.
Yeah.
That's what makes you who you are. So.
And I guess throughout that, I had always been told on set, wow, Annaliese, you have an amazing work ethic. Where do you want to be? Like, what do you want to do? You're amazing. And I always floundered. I think I looked back on my time at film school and felt like, I don't have a notebook in my pocket full of 80 feature film ideas, so I must not really be a director type. Even though I had known that I loved leading this team and leading them through something and creating something together, I know that that's like very much in me. I felt almost a barrier of saying, you can't say you want to be a director because that's what everyone says, and I don't even have all these like things to prove it. So there was a lot of doubt there, so I would often flounder in my response. I'd be like, well, I mean, I know I don't really want to be in the production realm. You could take a PA to a coordinator to like AD and you would go through the Directors Guild program and it's like thousands and thousands of hours on set. Right. And you see the ADs on set, and I had gotten pretty good at the smaller sets that I've done, but always adopted a tone of like, you can be winsome and you can be encouraging and you can get to the finish line still. Yeah. But a lot of ADs are a lot more crack the whip and stress and first in, last out. And I'm like, there's no way you're not losing 10 years of your life in that, or maybe not 10, but a lot of years of your life in that role. So I didn't want to pursue that path because I also didn't see them a part of the creative part.
Right.
It's more the like, you're the schedule, you're the crack the whip, you're the one that makes sure safety is key. And while I was passionate for that, it was like I wanted to stay dipping my toes in creative too. So I would flounder in my answers and I felt like I was squandering away chances for people to say, oh, Annaliese wants to be a writer. Great, I'm going to put her in mind for this, because I was just too scared to say this is what I want to do.
So was there something that changed for you for that?
So it's funny, I was in therapy at the time and still am, actually. Go to therapy. Everyone knows this now. It's good.
I think that's great. Yeah, I was talking to someone else about that recently, and sometimes, especially I would say even more so with guys, I think, where we feel like, oh, it's not macho or it's not manly, but yeah, we all need help.
And it can be expensive or it can be tricky to find a good therapist. I think that's the thing I've realized too, is like, don't be afraid to like job interviews, like dating, take different times with people. And if you don't feel totally free to share and they're not getting you somewhere, then like, thank you so much. Try the next person, But I was in therapy at the time and we were talking about this and I'm like, I feel aimless. I feel like I'm not sure what I want to be exactly. And she's like, well, is there anything that you have felt like that sounds really fun? And the thing that came to mind was this internet show that I had loved since high school and always thought, man, if I could ever work at Mythical Entertainment, the people who make Good Mythical Morning, Rhett and Link, yada, yada. Because I always saw them and saw, wow, they're making silly things. They're making fun things. They're making it with a spirit of we're all in this together. That would be amazing. But paired with that was this fear of like, but I could never, or no, it was this. Then she says, oh, that's awesome. Have you ever done anything to pursue that? And I was like, oh, well, no, I never have, because there's just this fear of like, oh, I'm not ready yet, or I can't pursue it and then be shot down. And I realized that I had been approaching a lot of life in this passive way of like, when I was worthy of something, it would come to me, which I do think can be true. But it took shifting in my head that we're allowed to want things and like pursuing them. And it was just, it seems so well done now, but at the time it hadn't been, of like, oh yeah, we're allowed to choose things and pursue them and say, oh, I wonder if this could work for me, let me try. I don't know. I because I'd spent so much time even in the path of different gigs of people saying, you're great, you should do this. And I would be like, oh, you think I should do this? Great. Oh, you're great, do this. And I hadn't stopped to say, you know, what would be a dream for me is to work at this kooky internet show. And I truly believed that. And so with my therapist, we made a decision that I would do something to pursue it. And these guys had a book coming out and they were doing a book tour, and they had a spot in LA that they said, oh, we are going to be here with the crew, get a ticket, come hang out, yada yada. So it was a spot in LA. So I bought myself one ticket with the goal, I'm going to go and try and talk to one of the crew members. Crazy goal, knowing now that like they got thousands and thousands of fans. You're not going to get a job by like being a fan, being at an event and be like, hey, hire me. So I had a pact with my therapist to go to this event and make some sort of pursuit of a job with a crew member, which is, again, crazy.
It's gutsy though.
It's gutsy though. Yeah. And it was me choosing, and it was me saying, hey, I'm worth like pursuing what I want. And yeah, you just have to take a risk and go for it. And so I had been thinking about what I was going to do, and I was like, well, I'll try and just give them my resume, I guess. And I had built up a good resume, so I knew I was a good candidate for stuff, but I was like, oh, I got to do something that stands out. This is so dumb. This is cringy dumb. At the time it was October, so it was around this time of year, and they had just done an episode about what happens when we leave things buried 6 feet underground or whatever. They do kooky stuff like that. And so I was like, let me take my resume and I'll fold it up and I'll put it in a jar and put like some dirt around it, and I'll be like, guess what I found buried 60 feet underground? What? That's so weird. What a bad idea. But I had gotten in my head like, I need some sort of clever in. This is so kooky. Man, okay, but it gets better. So I have this thing and I'm prepping it, and then I go on LinkedIn. Thank God he prompted me to go on LinkedIn, and I find that they have a job posted for a coordinator that like I had relevant work experience for. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is even better. Now I have a more like reasonable in than just like, I'm a fan and here's a jar with my resume in it. So I was like, great. So I made a cover letter with my resume, and so I put it in there. And I'm going to the event. I look cool. I look like a normal person. I have it in my little purse. And I had screenshot the guy who was hiring for the position because he wasn't a crew member I'd known seeing on camera. So I'm going to this event and I'm like, I gotta find Jacob. I'm gonna find Jacob at this event. I go by myself. I see the crew. I sit kind of near them, but I'm like, I can't talk to them. That's weird. And so I'm at this event just praying that I don't lose my nerve and don't just leave without doing something, but also feeling like, who are you? What are you thinking? I get up to go to leave through a crowded lobby, and I hadn't seen this person yet. So I'm like, am I going to give it to one of the crew members I recognize and say, give this to this person? And as I'm walking out the door that I choose out of like the 4 or 5 doors, 2 feet to my left or to my right is this guy that I had screenshotted, never met in my life. And I'm like, that's him. I got to talk to him. And I thank God I didn't lose my nerve. I go, I say, hey, I make small talk. I talk about the event, and I say, hey, are you still hiring for that event or that role? And praise God, his response was, yeah, we are. Why don't you email me about it? And in that moment, I had clarity of like, do not hand this man a jar of dirt. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because I actually got an interview. I crushed an interview. I was invited to take the job, and I was like floored out of my mind. Like I still remember that I found out driving back from a set that I had PA'd that we didn't have any service. And so when I saw that email came in, I don't really usually scream for joy, but I was screaming for joy. And it wasn't until a couple years into that job that I told everyone at work. I was like, now that I know they love me and they're not going to fire me, I can tell them like, oh yeah, I'm totally a fan. And also here's a jar of dirt with my resume in it that I almost gave to our boss. Like how dumb would that have been? So now it's a funny story at work. I love telling that story. It's so cringy and crazy, but it was the first time that I'd actually said, what happens if you choose what you want in life? It even connected to some of the ways that I met Jared and stuff. It was in a season of life of, instead of saying, oh, I wonder what will happen to me, hopefully it's good, and saying, wow, what an opportunity we have to choose and pursue and grow ourselves. And I don't know why it took me that long to learn, but it really did.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What an amazing story.
Yeah.
It just taking that step and doing something outside your comfort zone,
yeah,
doing something that's a little scary, but you have a goal in mind. You have something that you really, really want.
Yeah.
And you take that step and you do it.
Yeah.
And look where you are now.
I know, it's nuts. I still love my job. I've been promoted a couple times since. Yeah, but also I wouldn't recommend trying to give someone a jar of dirt when they haven't asked for a resume. But yeah, the choosing to do something about it and stepping outside your comfort zone is huge.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what your day-to-day job looks like now that you're working at Mythical Mornings.
I'm a producer for the Mythical Kitchen channel, which is a spin-off cooking channel for a lot of the food that they make on the show.
Right, because they have quite a few different channels, right? Yeah.
One of their famous formats is Will It Taco or Will It Ice Cream Sandwich, and they take different things and try it as those things. So it's everything from that to we'll make a fine dining 3-course meal out of Mountain Dew Baja Blast and like stuff like that. So it's very internet-y, but also with some cooking chops. So my role day to day is scheduling shoots, writing out beat sheets for episodes, developing episodes with the director and with the head culinary producers, working with the talent on set, booking talent for our show, crew morale, keeping spirits up, running the shoot on the day, checking in with post-production, writing post notes. So I get my hand in all parts of it in a really fun way, but also with a big enough crew where it's delegating and trusting too.
Are there maybe some favorite stories, favorite memories that you've had working there?
Just this year, we also have a podcast that's like a food debate podcast. It's called A Hot Dog is a Sandwich. Yeah, they'll discuss stuff like that. But we did a special series this summer where we wanted to get to the bottom of, is a hot dog a sandwich? So we set aside a 5-part series where we interviewed a philosopher, a historian, a lawyer, a business person. Like, is a hot dog a sandwich? And we got all sides of it. And then we even went to the Nathan's hot dog eating contest on Coney Island in New York that happens every year, where this guy named Joey Chestnut will eat like 70 plus hot dogs in 1 minute, and it's the grossest thing ever. And so that was my first time in New York, was this summer, going for a hot dog eating contest, and that just feels so ridiculous. And it was stressful, and it was fun, and it was sweaty, and it was with people from work who I now call like really close friends. And then we capped it off by going to a big food market in LA and doing like a live recording of the podcast, asking people of their opinions and selling hot dogs. And it was just really cool. Yeah, we've started to have memories like that where it's even outside the office. Another crazy memory is one time a car crashed into a hydrant outside of our studio, and it spouted water high enough that it landed on the roof and was doing that long enough that the roof collapsed in one part of the building, and it straight up flooded the office and parts of the studio, so that like enough that a chair in our lobby like floated past the front desk. And I just remember getting a call at like 8:00 at night of like, the studio's flooding, can you come like help us pull stuff out? And I just remember being there like splashing around in the studio like, okay, gotta collect this stuff. And so just nutty stuff like that where you don't really believe it. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's fun. So what are some of your goals? I guess kind of like looking forward in the next 5-10 years of your life. Like, what are some of the goals? What are some of the things that you want to accomplish, like career-wise or personal?
I really like what I'm doing. We get to create fun moments that turn into fun videos. And I think I enjoy the quick turnaround to that, because it's always fresh starts and it's always a chance to innovate. I would like to have the chance to flex my directing. I've directed a couple episodes for the channel, but I would like to flex my director skills in another feature film or in another narrative way in the future, especially as I tie up loose ends to Aventura and realize more and more like, man, I wish this version of Annaliese could have had the chance to make this. But I know that's not how it works, and that's why they say your first movie is gonna be your worst movie, so just make it.
Yeah. Get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way. and like, that's so true. It makes me think of a Dean Yamada quote, a professor from Biola. I don't know if he made this up, but he's like, a movie's never done, you just declare that it's finished. And it's like, man, I've been telling myself that. Me and Hannah and Josh have been telling us that for like years. Anyway, So I would love to do something else where I get to flex those skills in maybe a less insecure place. I think that would be really beautiful to do. Going back to the internet side or the role that I'm in now, a lot of my creative people that I look up to working in kids ministry and being passionate about teaching kids and kids creativity would be like Mr. Rogers, Phil Vischer, who created VeggieTales, these types of people. So I've always been fond of the idea like creating a kids show or kids content or something like that. So even brainstorming like, man, Mythical did their spin-off cooking channel, would they do a spin-off like kids show? And I would love to develop and create that or find something with a lasting impact in that world. I think that would be a lot of fun. I also daydream about starting a summer camp one day and just like building a camp in the forest somewhere and just planning the games and the skits and doing all of that. I feel like that would be a dream. So different things like that.
I love hearing your perspective on things. You know, that's when I want to bring people on the show, is I always want to hear what their perspective on just creativity is. So like when you create something and the environment, I think creating that safe environment where you can create and be free to express yourself, and then you share that with other people, which is kind of going back to what we were saying before about the collaborative process.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes... I don't know, it makes it's so special when you can do fun things with fun people.
Oh my gosh, it's the best.
Yeah.
It's truly the best. We have a day once a month where we're just cranking out 10 TikToks now because that's the world we live in. I love TikTok. We say at work like, one more thing until the end of content, guys, of just another video closer to the end of content, which is so dumb, but that's what Josh, the host on our show, will say. But I love it because we're just making 10 goofy videos that day, and it's just like, okay, what are we going to discover together today? What are we going to make together today? And obviously we have the plan and we have the people and the roles that we need, but in a space where people feel free to collaborate and be encouraged in that way, like, that's really fun. It's really exciting. I think the ability to not take yourself so seriously is also something I've really been drawn to, is people who can do that well while still trying to create excellence in their work, but also the keeping the perspective of, wow, isn't it crazy that our job is to make something up? Like, I think that's so cool.
You said there was a funny story about how you met your husband.
I mean, there's some rocky stuff of some bad, sad heartbreak. And then just kind of, you start to lose hope. You get sad. You figure it out. You put yourself out there and you're not really sure. And you start to think, do I need to want this less? And it's like, yeah, maybe you do. But I always hated that advice of like, just when you stop looking is when they show up. And I'm like, just you shut up. Leave me alone. I get that of like, you don't want to love from a place of need. You want to love from a place of like, I know I'm okay, right, but I see you and I want to love you too, you know? I think I was, through the getting of this job, seeing a lot of things more in that way of, wow, cool, so much is possible. I wonder what else is possible. And also I know that I'm okay, but also that's still something I want, and it's okay to want that. And even get specific about like, oh, what would I want and what would that look like? But it was funny because it was April of the pandemic, so like 1 month in, and at work they'll often do episodes that include the crew members in some way. So they had sent a prompt through the crew email saying, hey, is anyone on dating apps right now during the pandemic and want to be on an episode of the show? And so I had been on the dating apps previously, but I wasn't at that point. So I was like, I'll re-download it for a weekend, try and get a good story and get on the show. And so I did that, and I matched with like 2 or 3 people and they were interesting, but I also matched with Jared, who I was like, wait a second, this guy is so cool. We're like bantering so well. Like, I actually like this person. Like, this is so good. Well, at first, actually, I was scrolling and I was matching, but then it was so late at night. You know, we all like lost our sleep schedule at the beginning too, and you're just kind of like, why do I need to go to bed early? So it was like way too late at night, and I saw him and I was like, oh, I would totally match with this guy. Just by the way he had answered certain things too. I was like, this is my vibe for sure. And I was like, but I don't want to do a like post 12 p.m. match or whatever. I don't know. I was overthinking. I was like, I don't want to seem too desperate or like I'm that kind of girl. I don't know what that means. But so I was like, I'll do it tomorrow. So I set it aside. And then when I opened the app the next day, when I remember, I'm like, oh shoot, it refreshes. So I didn't have the chance to match. But then the next day or later that day, he matched with me. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I came in strong in our messaging of like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you matched with me because your profile tragically slipped away. So we went right into it. It was great, fun times chatting. I messaged the show being like, hey, I actually did like match with a good person if you guys want to talk about it. They didn't end up picking me for the show, but I had started now this relationship with this person who, because of the pandemic, we didn't meet in person for weeks and weeks. And our first few dates were the like FaceTime dates, or you remember when people were first starting hyping up PowerPoint parties of like putting on a PowerPoint with a kooky theme. We did that on one of our first dates of like, okay, you're going to have this prompt and you're going to have this prompt. So we're like in our own bedrooms over Zoom being like, oh no, on my next slide. And it was just like so fun. And he never put the pressure of, oh, okay, when are we meeting in person? Like it was a very patient and steady, like it was the first time in a relationship where I didn't feel the graspiness of, oh my gosh, I gotta get a text back right away, or I gotta this and this, because I could tell I was more at peace of who I was, of just like, oh, I know I'm great, and not in a cocky way, but I know I'm a great person. I got great things going for me. I also think that about this person. Let's see what happens. And it truly was just like that, instead of oh, my worth is caught up in what this person thinks of me, which is cliche, but it happened and it was very nice. But also everyone's journey is different, you know, so you can't copy and paste. And yeah.
So when you guys met in person, what was the first date like when you guys actually met in person?
It was like, oh man, I have a crush on him. And it was nice. We met, and then it became just like park dates of like, then it was months and months before we were like at each other's places at all. So I was living in Pasadena at the time, and there was this really pretty overlook, and we met and we just got Chick-fil-A, classic good Christian dating. Nice. And yeah, we just talked, and it was so fun. And by the time it was dark enough, we both still wanted to hang out. So it was like, okay, I'll drive home, you drive home, but like, can we watch a show when we get back, you know? And you just like log on, and you're like 3, 2, 1, press play. And so it was like all of that just felt like, oh, I didn't know this kind of person existed. And I think he felt similar of, oh, I didn't know someone like you would exist. And I think with the backdrop of the pandemic, things already feel very, what's going on? And so it was the pandemic plus being at this place that I had only ever dreamed about working, plus like, okay, I guess anything could happen at this point, through lots of steadiness and open communication. And he's a very thoughtful communicator and very perceptive. And so I think through that, we were able to build just like a great foundation. But definitely interesting. Like the firsts were very staggered, of like first movie together was like months, and movie theater together was like months and months in. But yeah, it was really special.
Yeah. And then he proposed, and
I know, now we're married, which is crazy. The end of October will be 1 whole year of being married.
Wow.
Which is crazy, because we could date for a whole year, be engaged for a whole like half a year, and now we've been married. Feels still weird because pandemic time is also
everybody's timeline got off. Yeah.
So crazy. But even story and relationships is like, you never know what you're gonna get, and you're allowed to want things, and it doesn't mean that we'll get those things, but I don't know.
You have a much better shot at getting them.
Yeah.
If you try.
Yeah.
And then I think even if you don't get them, I think also you, like, one, I would say you grow as a person.
Exactly.
So you grow in your confidence, you grow in just your personhood, where you're like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
You know, I'll get it next time. And each time as you do that, you grow, and you're teaching your mind, you're resetting how you think about things.
Which is sometimes finding the beauty in something else because of the way you're growing. Earlier in TikTok, and maybe this wasn't even from TikTok, but the phrase "do it for the plot" or would like come around, of just like any hardship in life, even, you know, when you start to see it through that lens of like, okay, how is this going to play into my story? It also, as an Enneagram 4, I don't know if you're an Enneagram person, I know it's all fake, but as a person who's very like likes to be individual, or likes to know, oh yeah, I'm special and my path is special, it's fun to think about, okay, how is this going to play into everything? And there's solace in that, and even knowing, okay, even this hard thing makes a good story, or adds, or is part of my story. But
and then I think that also helps you to write stories too. So if you're writing a story, and when you can write from experience, and you can write a love story, and it's like, I know what that's like now because I've experienced it. And you take bits of that And, you know, you can change it. You take bits from other people's stories. But I think having a personal connection with something, with a story, like you're going to be able to tell that story so much more effectively.
Oh, totally.
When it's something that you've experienced and you're able to put your own, you know, your own heartache, your own pain, but your own enjoyment and the fun and the, you know, the ups and the downs and like all that encapsulates a great story. Is if when you have that in your own life and you can share that with other people.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like my favorite stories to latch onto are ones that get really specific in some way, you know, or like those are my favorite characters were the ones with the really unique jobs or the really unique exchange with some random character. Like I love movies that do that, of just have something so specific that doesn't even need to drive the plot, but it adds the richness that makes me think, oh yeah, this is real life, or this is what it's like to be human, is be a part of all these little things and not know how it all comes together necessarily.
But there's something magical about that when you see it. Yeah. Do you have any favorite films or favorite books maybe?
Yeah, my favorite movie I think is Little Miss Sunshine, which does play into some of the aspirational themes of Aventura, of like a family road trip or a team having a common goal. But with what I love how Little Miss Sunshine did this so well is there's heartbreak and mess and nuance and like complicated characters, but also a family coming together to get the daughter to a beauty pageant that she's going to fail at is just like so good. And it's funny but sad, and I'm a sucker for a good road trip movie, because my other favorite would probably be the Muppet movie, the original one that they're on a road trip for like similar goals. So I would joke that Aventura is like a mesh of those two, but mixed with a little bit of inspiration from my Cuban heritage and one day going to community college and often seeing the plot of it is a team's trying to make a movie and get to a film festival, but they don't have the actors. And the festival's at the end of the week. So they asked the director, where are you going to get actors? That cut to a Hispanic day worker camp. And they're like, people lined up ready to work for things. And they're like, let's have auditions. And so that's where the movie starts. And I had seen a space like that on my way to community college every day. It was just like, oh, I bet it'd be fun to just get those people who are ready to work into theatrics in some way. I wonder what that would be like. And that kind of was the inspiration for that. But yeah, we'll all see it one day. It's very close. We're at the point of just considering a movie done and like getting it back to the people who worked so hard on it, because that's the part that eats at me the most, is knowing, wow, so many people sacrificed in a beautiful way. And yes, this is riddled with anxieties and hurt and different things, and looking back and not feeling proud of certain aspects of it. But the thing that I'm the most proud of is the people. And so that's the achy part, is not having yet given that back in gratitude, saying, wow, thank you so much.
But yeah, I mean, it's a process. I think, I would say, you know, don't burden yourself with that. You know, like I think it's great to obviously to finish and to, you know, because you put that capstone on it, and it's like, it's been such a long process and you've been there for the whole time, and it's been tough, and then, you know, it's ups and downs, but you've persevered and you've overcome. And I think to finish it and complete it and put it aside and say, yeah, it's finished, it's done. Yeah. I think it's very cathartic, I think, to do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, I also don't think you should feel burdened or hurt inside that, you know, it's taken a long time, because sometimes things take a long time. You know, it's just part of life.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know it's been a little bit while, but like, what was the writing process like for you for that? Because you were you co-wrote it with someone, right? Or did you write it all yourself?
I wrote the first version of it.
Because it went through a couple drafts.
Yeah. And then Hannah Chu and Josh Nelson jumped in to help with later drafts, because as it started, it was coming up on a senior thesis project. A lot of people would produce or write or create a short film. So I had written it over a summer working at a summer camp. The original script was around like 30 or 40 pages, which is too long for a short film in theory, but also it's not quite a feature film.
Yeah.
And so it was this thing where I was pitching it around to my friends that I knew I wanted to work with, saying, hey, I'm thinking a project kind of like this. Don't worry though, I got to make it really, really short. And Josh Nelson was the one with the crazy sparkle in his eye saying, but what if we made it longer? And he was like, let's be ambitious, because this is the time to be ambitious. And in a lot of ways, he's totally right. And we wouldn't have learned as much as we did if we didn't shoot for the stars. Then it became a short period of time of saying, okay, how can we flesh this story out to be more of the like 90 which feels crazy that we did that, but it was a truly very rough draft, so easy enough to flesh it out a little bit more. So they were instrumental in that process. But I think I've learned since then more of the methods of, okay, having your note cards and getting your beats out there, or making an outline and then fleshing it in more. I forgot you asked about favorite books. This isn't necessarily my favorite book, but a book I read recently. It was called Bird by Anne Lamott. I don't know too much of her other works, but she's a writer, and in this story she talks a lot about what it's like being a writer, and it was she gave lots of great examples how to write from your own experience, like we were talking about earlier. She says, like, if you ever don't think you're a writer, start describing like your school lunch when you were in elementary school, or like just like get specific or find those places. And Bird by Bird comes from a story from her own childhood, I think, of someone in her family giving the advice to someone else who had a project about a bunch of birds, and they're like, I don't know how I'm gonna do it, and then the person was like, you're just gonna start by writing bird by bird. Anyway, I'm not selling it that well, but it's a really good book for writers. It got me inspired recently to say, I want to get back into writing from a place of specificity and like just learning how to do that, because I think when I was writing Aventura, I wasn't really in that spot of knowing how to connect characters as much. When I look at the Aventura script, I realize my hesitancy to put any real stakes. I think I had the hijinks of like, it'll be kind of funny to have these people in this scenario, or it'll be kind of interesting to have this type of person next to this type of person. But I don't think I was as comfortable with making uncomfortable things for my characters. It would almost be like, here's the stakes and here's the solution they're doing, or like, here's the scene and then the next scene, it's pretty much okay. Which is kind of funny because I'd say I'm growing in skill at being less conflict avoidant. So it's kind of funny that I saw that in the script of just like, it can't be too hard to solve anything. But the best stories, like even watching The Hangover, I remember watching that in inspiration for Aventura. That's a good example of like, it just gets messier and messier, and you're like, how are they going to get out of this? And that's what we love.
Yeah.
I was more just trying to get the movie from start to finish, not necessarily say, okay, how can this be the hardest for the characters, or even show characters having change. Because I think one of the characters is who it would be most important to show change in. And I don't think that happened. It kind of happened, but I don't think it happened in a way that would have had as much payoff if it had been more connected to real, just what it's like to be a real human. So yeah, I think for me it was brainstorming some of the scenarios that I think would be absurd or fun, coming up with characters and trying to do a little bit of, okay, what does this character need? What do they want? How do they
go about getting that?
Yeah. So I had a little bit of experience to do those sorts of things, but it's a whole other skill set to make it shine through a story versus just, okay, they got to get from here to here. Okay, they did it. Nice. Is it a little funny? Cool. Yeah. What has your writing process been? Do you like have something you usually start with in outline or characters, or?
I've said it on the show before, but I usually work with my brother a lot. So our stories are usually sort of plot heavier stories. So usually we have like a, like high concept, whatever that means. But like, it's like,
I like how you couldn't say it without being like high concept.
Well, I feel like everybody has like a high concept thing now.
Yeah.
But it's always a thing where it's like, okay, it's like a what if. So we start out like a what if. Okay, so what if, like one of the stories that we really like to work on now is it's like, what if Inception was told by Stephen King? And it's like, okay, that's cool.
Fun.
That's cool. And you can kind of, it's easy. It's like but you get it. You have like a log line like that. And it's like, okay, the girl is escaping from this dream world that's not real and things are changing around her. But it's a horror goth sort of story. And it's like, oh, yeah, I get it. So things like that, where it's like it's like an interesting concept, but it's something that you can kind of get easily. Oftentimes it gets so big. So it's, my he's really good at telling intricate stories. And sometimes it's harder for us to bring it down into like a feature. So like he's working on a feature right now. It really can change, like depending on like what kind of stories. But I feel like most of the time they're sort of plot driven sorts of stories. But at the same time, the characters are so important because the characters are what anchor the story.
Yeah.
And you need that.
I'm watching a little bit of Rings of Power right now. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
And that's something I noticed in the first episode of like, wow, this is amazing and obviously beautiful and visual and cool and expensive. And I'm very impressed. It's hard to put your finger on why I didn't care about any characters yet. Or like by the first episode, maybe it was just me. But I'm like, wow, how heartless am I that I can be like poo-poo this whole like $1 billion everything. But if you don't ground it enough in something that we can latch on to, because I think they tried to, right? Of like, oh, we have a little kid moment. Now here's the person. And it's like, but that didn't do it for me. And if you didn't, I don't know, like that's so crucial. It's hard.
Yeah. And then sometimes it's easier to get it on paper. It's like, oh, on paper, we get it to work. And then you actually get to it and you're like, maybe it didn't work as well as we thought.
That's true. At every stage, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the characters are so important. And I know for me, like a strong character is a character who is sympathetic. So it's someone that, like we were saying, someone you can relate to, someone who has problems, has an issue, something. And it doesn't mean they have to be like, an evil person, but they just have to have some problems. If they're too perfect, then it's hard to relate to them because all of us have problems, all of us have issues, and we're all like, oh yeah, we're all trying to get better.
Right.
So when you have a character that's trying to get better, those are the ones generally that we relate to the best.
Right.
So they have a problem and they want something. So what do they want to do? What do they want? They want to get married, or they want to get a new job, or whatever it is that they want. And then it's like, okay, but what do they need? Because a lot of times what we want is not necessarily what we need as people. It's like we want, a cake or like, a birthday cake because that will make us happy. But it's like, no, it's going to make you fat. It's like, so what do you need is what you really need is you need comfort because that's what you're really craving. It's like you want, cake and cookies and stuff because it makes you comfortable. But what you really need is something to comfort you. And sometimes it's tricky because a lot of times the character or us, we don't see what we really need. We see what we want, right? But we don't know what we need. And I think that's part of the story is you kind of take your character on a journey as they learn to see what they go after what they want. But through that journey, they actually find what they actually need. Yeah. Which can be something completely different. And it's cool too when you have a flip, because sometimes in a story, like they go after one thing and they can fail at the end because they didn't get what they wanted. And it can be like the dark moment. But then they kind of realize, oh, well, that's actually not what I needed this whole time. Yeah. So I think when you kind of see it like that, and I think when you're breaking down characters, and obviously that's a very kind of simplified version of a character, but if you're trying to develop a character and you're like, okay, it's not working, if you kind of go to like bullet points like that, you can kind of see, oh, well, maybe that's the problem. So yeah, it's something that I actually like doing with stories. I like to kind of script doctor or like work on other people's stories a lot too, and kind of see, okay, how do I make this better? How do I work on this?
I love that.
Yeah, it's cool. I just love stories. I love talking about stories.
This is so fun.
It's awesome. I really think like the payoff for any good story is having the setup, and I think it's the same thing with our lives too. Kind of like, which I thought was really cool when you were talking about like how you got your job that you have now, and like just that process of wanting something really hard and then going for it. And like that's what a story is. So I think anytime we can take that and make it personal is going to help us make great stories like that.
Yeah. No, you're so right with the process even make those your goals, and that's almost like you're achieving the needs in pursuit of your wants. That's really good.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Had a really good talk.
Yeah.
Be looking forward to seeing like what you do in the future, and I'm excited to kind of see. It's been cool just to see you kind of blossoming and growing just as a person, and with your job and your career and everything. So yeah,
thank you.
Kudos to you.
No, that's why I love staying in touch with college people, because same with family members even, they can say, oh, I knew when you wouldn't even dared to do that. So I think that's fun. We can be that for each other.
Yeah, you're always going one step further and growing and becoming a better person every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's what we try to do.
We are doing it.
Yeah.
We're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
sure.
we're staying creative just like we wanted to. That means we're doing it.
Yeah.
Do you remember a class saying that? I know you're wrapping up. I'm sorry. I remember one class, I don't remember which one, was like, look around. 10 of you are the only ones that will be in this industry at the end of the day. And I'm like, okay, harsh. I think about that still sometimes. Of like, oh, if we're doing something creative, then we're winning. We're already doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Annaliese.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
So thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys next time.